Welcome to Spinning Back Clique, where each week here at MMA Junkie, we take a spin through the biggest stories in MMA. On today's episode, UFC 300. It's here, it's Saturday, and it's stacked. And today's show is all about it. We're going to go 90 minutes with the Junkie team rotating in and out. So buckle up. Hello, everyone. Gorgeous George here on the con. And joining me throughout the program will be Goes from MMA Junkie Radio. He's in Las Vegas. And Danny Segura, our outstanding reporter, he's down in Miami. Also hosts Hablemos MMA for you Spanish-speaking MMA fans. Check it out. Cold coffee will be on the ones and twos. But before we get started, if you would kindly hit that like button, like right now, along with the subscribe, let's throw it in there. So we got a parlay, right? I'll make sure we even go 90 minutes next week. You do that for me, we'll do that for you. All right, I want to welcome Matt Wells from the editorial team. He's one of the big three. He's a Lakers fan. I want to give him a fist bump for that. He's also a Cowboys fan, so he gets a yellow card for that. Guys, we have two undisputed title fights on the line this Saturday. In the main event, Alex Pereira will defend his light heavyweight title against Jamahal Hill. Hill used to hold that title, never lost it, actually. Had to relinquish it because of a serious injury. You know the story. He tore his Achilles heel last July, trying to be like Mike. Didn't work out for him, but he's back. He's healthy. He's ready to go. Pereira defeated Yuri Prochazka for the vacant title along the way, and here we are. All right, guys, so let's talk about this main event. It's going to be a doozy. It didn't come off well, like the splash that I think everyone wanted for the main event for UFC 300, but these are some gangsters. What do you think, Matt Wells? Is this thing up to par with UFC 100 and 200? Are we shortchanging these cats?
I think we are kind of shortchanging them a little bit because when you look at, the main event of UFC 100, what do we have? We have Brock Lesnar, Frank Mir, heavyweight title fight, biggest star in the sport at the time, arguably in Brock Lesnar. You definitely had number 1A or number 2 in the co-main event with GSP. So I think the combination of those two really kind of set that apart for UFC 100. But that was an incredible main event, and it lived up to the billing for UFC 100. UFC 200, man, we had. I think we all remember the chaos there, right? We were supposed to get Daniel Cormier versus John Jones, and then we had the drug test of fight week, the DC foot stomping on Embedded, and then we end up with Amanda Nunes and Miesha Tate, which, I mean, hell, that ended up being pretty cool in hindsight, considering what Amanda Nunes went on to do. With this main event for UFC 300, though, it's not that same star power, although I think it could be when we look back on it in the future, because you have to look at what Alex Pereira has done so far. Just a few fights into the UFC, claimed a title, right? And he won his first title in fight number 4. And then, he loses and he comes back to win a second title in a second division in fight number 7. A two-division champion already this quickly. This is a guy that's already a Hall of Famer, right? Already going to be a Hall of Famer. What's he going to do from here on out? I know he's not going to have that super long run because he's 36 years old already, but he's already built an incredible resume in a short period of time. So I think in hindsight, when we look back on this in a couple of years, depending on what he does from this point on out, especially if he wins this fight, we're going to be talking about, man, that was incredible for him to get that spot at UFC 300. But on paper, as it stands right now, it's not the same star power that a lot of people were really hoping for, although this is an incredible fight. Jamahal Hill, first Dana White Contender Series champion. He also won the belt very quickly in his 7th fight. So, I mean, there's a lot to like about this fight. But those critics out there, they're gonna be, real nitpicky. They're gonna be like, oh, it should have been Conor, it should have been GSP making a big return. It should have been John Jones. But, people are going to complain about any and everything. But this fight right here is still an incredible fight. And I think it's one that's worthy of carrying this card.
Matt, is the UFC doing a good enough job of hyping it? Or is it going to be up to us, media, and other hardcore fans to remind people, hey, Hill versus Teixeira didn't suck. And then the fights that Izzy had versus Pereira, they didn't suck. So, we're literally got two freight trains headed for each other in the main event, but yet again, it's fight week now. We're all going to get jacked, but still, it seems like there's something missing here. Did the UFC maybe shortchange these two guys too?
GG, everything is always up to the media, from promoting fighter pay to promoting events.
Yeah.
We all have to do. We have to do the work here. Okay.
Yeah,
But
and I mean, let's be real here. Take a look at the poster. Do you know who's fighting? No, I have no clue because they decided to put no fighters on this poster.
You're saying it's not as good as this one back here, Matt?
Listen, that was so much better. UFC 200, the original UFC 200, where everybody was kind of circled around. Incredible posters. Why they just decided to do a gold flag with nobody and then put in fine print, hey, these guys are fighting. Wait, come on, dude. Like, that's ridiculous. You got to put faces on the poster. Always put faces on the poster. It's incredible.
No,
yes, we are going to bear the brunt of this, I believe.
Media's fault, always.
Goes, what's the level of excitement for this main event? But I want to ask you specifically, you're in Vegas. You've been out and about. We've had some relatives in town, friends. I mean, are we seeing the hype around the city?
Not just yet. But look, you have to remember there's a WrestleMania card that just happened. March Madness has been out of control. So I think now is when everybody's going to start to turn that page. You know, as soon as that fight's or that game's over tonight, I think people will start to turn the page and it'll all become fight weekend stuff. But right now it's pretty calm. Levels of excitement for the card, I'm crazy. I'm out of my mind. I can't wait for it to happen. For the main event, I think I'm going to get there, guys, but I'll be honest with you. The difference between this fight and maybe what we get in other cards is those goosebumps, right, that you get at the end because there's something crazy on the line or there's some heat in between the two fighters. We don't have this, and that's okay because the card overall is fantastic, right? I kind of say it's sort of like if you go to an amusement park and the top two attractions are closed down. Yeah, it's going to suck a little bit, but you're still going to have a good time, right? You're still going to go to all the other rides. It's still going to be fun. I think that's what's going to happen with this card. I think there's going to be a lot of highs and a lot of lows, but this type of fight and the positioning of it is so important because you don't want to walk out of that arena. You don't want to turn off your TV with something that you just saw that was boring or flat. These are two fighters that don't give you any of that. All they give you is excitement. So I think even though maybe star power might not be there, the level and intensity that these guys bring, I think that's what's going to leave us with a good feeling at the end of the night.
All right. So we went to Goes for a take because he's the local in town. Danny, let me go to you something different here. Hablemos MMA. It's almost like you have a different type of audience. What's it been like the last few months? Have people been slowly approaching a level of excitement for this card, for this main event? And then tell me about you were at UFC 299, where people are already turning the page once that event was over and talking about UFC 300 there.
I feel like for the hardcores, I mean, this is on the map. UFC 300 is huge, one, because it's 300, right? We're celebrating 300 pay-per-view events in what it is the best company that's ever existed as far as mixed martial arts is concerned. But as far as like the casuals, I don't know if it's a change in times because I feel like there's just so much going on in the world now than before when UFC 200 went down or UFC 100. But I just feel like among the casuals, this doesn't seem that big of a deal. And I don't know if it's because of the main event, not having a Conor McGregor, not having a John Jones, not having a Brock Lesnar or these superstars that really make it known that, hey, this event's coming up. I hope that changes. We've seen some pay-per-views and some events just change drastically as soon as we get closer to the date. Just one little phrase, one little jab at a press conference or at a media day or a brawl or a push can just ignite the whole thing. And all of a sudden we're talking like crazy about UFC 300. But I do feel like going into it, this should have more hype. I blame it on the poster, not MMA media. But all in all, the hardcores, the people watching this right now, the people over at Hablemos MMA, I feel like we're all pretty hyped. I mean, dude, freaking Davison Figueiredo and Cody Garbrandt is opening up the first preliminary fight. This could easily be the pay-per-view opener of the UFC 301 event in Brazil, or even just part of that main card. This from top to bottom is stacked. For a hardcore, this is amazing. This is as good as it gets.
Mm-hmm. All right, chat room. If you're watching through Facebook or YouTube, you can participate in the show. Leave a question, leave a comment. The better ones, the more quality ones, are the ones that I'm going to be drawn to, and I'll include them in the show. I saw Catted asking, is this live or pre-recorded? It's live. It's a 90-minute show. We started just a few minutes ago, so you haven't missed much, right? Tell a friend, retweet, repost, share, all that good stuff. We still got a long ways to go. This show's weekly, and it's noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific every Monday. It's called Spinning Back Clique, and it's here. It's this junkie team that gets together to discuss the biggest topics in MMA. Today, we're discussing UFC 300. So we're talking about the main event. I want to know who the chat thinks is going to win, Hill or Pereira. And any of you guys, are you willing to reveal your hand? The staff picks come out every week on Junkie, and we're doing all the fights. What is it, guys? 12 or 13? We're doing all of them.
13.
And you readers you can also participate in that as well on the front page of MMA Junkie. But any of you guys want to tip your hand? Who do you like? Give us a mini breakdown. None of us are Dan Tom, but we all have some knowledge.
Mm-hmm. I think there's a little bit of mystery though with this fight. Normally, look, if we were to say the best Jamahal Hill is going to show up, then I think the breakdown of this fight is a lot different. But because there's that little bit of mystery, did he just take this fight to make a paycheck? Is he 100%? That's what kind of keeps the intrigue here and what may or may not happen. If you tell me a 100% Jamahal Hill showing up, I think the experience is what's going to get Alex Pereira in this fight. He's really good at one thing, and he's phenomenal at it, right? He's been able to put people away with it. But Jamahal Hill has pretty decent fight IQ, and he can mix things up, and he can get nasty. If the best Jamahal Hill shows up, for me, I feel like it's Jamahal Hill that wins this one. But there's a little bit of mystery there, and that's what kind of keeps us a little confused, I think, when we're breaking down this fight.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think part of the issue when you look at breaking down this fight is like it comes down to who's gonna, I guess, lose a little bit of patience first. I think Hill has a little bit more of that patience to kind of pick his shots, because we see Alex get a little bit wild sometimes, where he gets a little bit over aggressive. That's why he got knocked out against Izzy, I think, because he just started wailing on him against the fence, left himself wide open for a counter. And I think Hill rather is a little bit more patient in those spots, and he'll wait and kind of pick his shot a little bit better. But both guys are capable in ending this fight at any moment. So I think that's really the intrigue here. I think if you are a betting man or a betting woman, betting person out there, I think, inside the distance finish for one of these is going to be a safe bet. Just comes down to who is it going to be.
Mm-hmm. And Danny, we do have like a 4-year age difference, but there's a lot of wear and tear on Pereira's chin. How much do you think that's going to get talked about this week? Because Hill's heavy-handed, man.
That is 100% true. He's got a mixed martial arts career on top of him, but also a lengthy kickboxing one. But I do feel like his move up to 205 has given him a little bit more life, a little bit more
hydration
in the brain, and so I do feel like chin wise he will be okay. If he gets knocked out, I don't think it's gonna be the chin, right? We'll see what kind of shot lands from Hill, but I do feel like it's gonna be more like a Hill thing. I don't necessarily think or feel he enters UFC 300 with a questionable chin. I mean, he just fought Rakic, not Rakic, but Prochaska, and took some big shots and managed to survive and, get the finish. So I do think anybody can win this just because they're two strikers with power. It's light heavyweight. But man, Pereira, I think he's got all the momentum. He's just been killing it right now. I do feel like this is the best MMA version of Pereira, even better than the one that became champion at 185. And look, as you mentioned, Hill's coming off an injury, layoff. He was supposed to fight at UFC, or those are the rumors that this plan was supposed to go down a few weeks later. So I don't know how recovered he is from that injury. And look, at the end of the day, I just think the matchup is just horrible for Hill, right? Like Hill shines in the striking department, right? He's not really much of a wrestler, of a grappler, and he's getting arguably right now the most credentialed striker in mixed martial arts. So I feel pretty comfortable in picking Pereira here. Or Pereira, sorry. So I'm going to go with Pereira and Still.
Man, he's got to blend things together, though. He's got to blend them together, because you're right. If they go tit for tat, shot for shot, there's one guy that's just incredibly skilled at this. I think Hill's got to mix things up, man. He's got to do it early. One factor that I did want to touch with you guys, and I think Matt touched on it a little bit as well, patience, I think, is going to be very important in this fight, but it's hard to be patient when you are the main event of the biggest card ever in history. Who's going to break first? If they start to boo, if things are a little slow, who's going to be that fighter that breaks first because of the magnitude of this fight, where they were placed, the trust that's been instilled in them by the organization. I think that could maybe play a little bit of a factor in this fight. And it's a fight where the margin for error is so tiny.
One last thing here, and then we'll move on. Pereira's, I think, on his 4th fight in about a year too. You know, how many times have we ran into that where we go, they need that break? Like the fighters pick up a lot of momentum when they fight often, especially when you're wrapping gold around your waist, right? But at some point, that wear and tear of the training camps, guys, it's not the fight so much. I mean, of course, that has something to do with it, but the training camps itself. You think that might be a topic, a storyline here? I haven't heard too much about that one.
That's a good point. And I mean, part of the issue is as well, is it where it's kind of like wear and tear versus a well-rested Hill. But also that question mark of, is Hill going to be 100% coming off the injury, you know? So there's a lot of dynamics at play here that make this fight really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Let me stick with you, Matt, here. Let's talk about the co-main event. See Danny's poster up there. We got Brock. That was the draw, right? 1.6 million pay-per-views 16 years ago or something like that. Mm-hmm. He's backed up with Frank Mir, who wore gold. He was a Vegas local. But look at the next guy. GSP co-main event. Solid co-main event. This one, yeah, let's respect those gals. They deserve where they're at. We have a quality number 1 contender against a quality champion, but it's just not popping on the streets like they say. You think that's kind of hurting things, you know, because we're going to have some fun discussing BMF in just a second, but this fight right here, what's lacking?
Well, I think one of the things going for this is that, I mean, it's not that huge star power yet that people were expecting, right? Because like you said, in the co-main of 100 was GSP. Everybody was going crazy for that. Are these two ladies like that star power yet? No, they're not, and unfortunately. But I mean, they're both incredible fighters, and I think, you know, Zhang Weili has a lot going for her to where she could be one of those names in the future. I mean, she's already the first Chinese champion in UFC history. She's a powerful, like, scrappy fighter who's got, you know, every skill in the book, so she can do it all. I know that, you know, the fans on her side of the globe will be really amped for this fight. I think stateside, though, we're just not as excited for it because, you know, she can't cut the promo in English and stuff like that. And, you know, that's kind of the things that some people are drawn to, right? But she's getting better at those things over time as well. So she's also very exciting. So I think that will kind of make up for, I guess, the language barrier, so to speak, between both of these ladies. But it's an incredible fight on paper. But does it meet that level of expectation that the fans were wanting for UFC 300? No, but it's an incredible fight. And an interesting little tidbit about this fight and the main event, everybody has identical UFC records going in. Both of them are 8-2 with Xiaonan and Zhang. Both of them are 8-2 in the UFC. Like the main event, 6-1 as well. So that's kind of a little interesting little side piece here, a little tidbit of information. But there's a lot to like about the fight. But again, as people are in the chat have been saying about this and the main event, it's just not that star power that we would expect for UFC 300 because Dana White hyped it up to be this super next level, massive mega event with all of the stars in the world. And we kind of got oversold on that, but we still have an incredible fight.
Danny, she's a 2-time champion, Weili, and she's going for her 3rd title defense. Where do you put her as far as GOAT talk? Do you anoint her that already? Could she be that on Saturday night? Or she's still got a few steps to go?
Nah, she's got multiple steps to go, in my opinion. I think the conversation as far as the strawweight GOAT is very clear here. And there's only one good name for that, and that is Xiaonan Sterling. 6 title defenses, maintained the belt for a while. You know, I have an issue sometimes, and you see there's a lot of in boxing. You see a lot of boxers brag, oh, I'm a 2-time, 3-time world champion. Well, that means you lost the belt. That means you lost the belt and you had to come back and get it. Like, and that's fine. That's admirable for sure. But let's not forget about the consistency here. Xiaonan Sterling, I know that she lost to Zhang Weili, but you can't do MMA math within GOAT talk. You got to look at the resumes. She defended the belt 6 times at strawweight. It was a force that you cannot compare. There hasn't been another champion that dominant in the division. Like Rose lost the belt, Zhang Weili lost the belt, Carlos Esparza lost the belt. It just seems that they keep swapping and trading the belt. There hasn't been consistency, something that Xiaonan Sterling gave us. So Zhang Weili, great fighter. Can she go on to become the GOAT? Maybe. She's definitely done a lot, and She has the platform to do so. We'll see what the next few years look like, what Saturday looks like, because Zhang Xiaonan is no easy opponent. But as of now, I think the conversation is pretty clear, and that spot remains for Joanna Jędrzejczyk.
Danny, real quick, if Rose is listening and she says, I kind of beat her twice, you sure you don't want to reconsider me as the GOAT? What would you tell her?
Look, you can't make the MMA math. Rose, yes, she beat Joanna Jędrzejczyk twice,
run, right? You like the run,
but like you got to look at the body of work.
True.
Like, how long did she defend the belt? How long did she stay at the top? Right? No, that's Joanna Jędrzejczyk 100%.
Goes. This was the division that popped for women's MMA. Has it lost its shine, or is it just because they're in transition? Where are we here?
I mean, it's lost its shine a little bit. These divisions, there's very few divisions that just maintain, right? Lightweight is just always a beast, right? But for the most part, they can be roller coasters. I think it's lost a little shine because you look at like a Lupe Godinez or Mackenzie Dern, the Tabitha Ricci's of the world that were kind of promising us something in the future. They've kind of fizzled out a little bit. And so it's left us with not very much to look forward to. But Tatiana Suarez, man, I'm telling you, that is a tough out. She can come in here and she can really change things. And the other way around, too. If Zhang Weili can beat her, I think that probably cements her, that the GOAT, because Tatiana Suarez is no joke, man.
Matt Wells, thank you so much for hanging with us. I hope you still can run out there and catch some of that eclipse. Put on them shades, though, man. Don't burn your eyes. And we'll talk to you soon. Thank you, brother.
Absolutely.
All right, folks. All right, cool. So Mike Bond, the MMA media titan, is going to join us for this segment as we talk about the BMF title fight. It is a title fight, folks. It's a title defense, I should say. And the exciting thing about not just that fight is 155 pounds, like Go says, it's always popping. There's 4 fights at 155 pounds. So let's examine those. Again, welcome, Mike. The BMF title, man, what's your whole take on it? It's being defended. Pay-per-view points come along with it. It should route you towards a title shot at some point. But I think Gaethje recently did some stuff with someone I know. You know, like what's that whole deal about this BMF fight?
I mean, I think we've talked about this a lot over the years, right? For Masvidal and Diaz, it felt fitting because Diaz kind of created it with the post-fight call-out and everything and pushing for that fight. So I was cool with them doing it then. I thought the Poirier-Gaethje fight was a pretty fitting way to bring it back to, just given the amount of wars those two have put on and the level of excitement. And I think this is a good way to do it too. Like, I mean, we're kind of past the stage of being like, oh, should this be a thing? Should it not be a thing? The UFC is clearly behind it. Dana White, said after the first fight that they wouldn't be doing it again. And look where we are now. We not only have had it brought back in, but we have someone defending it in Justin Gaethje now. And he can create his own little bit of lineage here and being the first to defend that. He told me the other day that would mean something to him. So I guess, this is part of our culture now a little bit when it comes to this BMF belt. I don't think it's going anywhere. We'll see what happens with this fight. But could anyone say, I mean, pushing aside the fact that this is messed up 2 weight classes seemingly at lightweight and featherweight. No one really wants to see either of these guys lose. There's all those elements of it, but like the fight itself, it's going to be amazing. You put it in a vacuum, like it's going to be absolutely fantastic. So I can't wait for these two to get in there. I talked to both guys in the past few days and they all seem very much there mentally, physically. Very curious to see how Max Holloway looks back at lightweight, and we know what these guys have to offer. So I'm absolutely stoked for this.
That said, is it the people's main event?
It's got to be, right?
Well, I mean, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. You talk to a lot of people, obviously, at events that you cover. People will hit you up probably on social media. I'm wondering, are they more drawn to that fight when they pick your brain than the other 2 title fights?
I feel like, there's definitely some interest in Alex Pereira. Like he has become, I think, one of the prominent stars in the entire sport. You look at his numbers, things like that. He's definitely up there. There's the reason he is the headliner of this card, for better or worse. But if you look at kind of the total package of both sides of a matchup, this one has, I think, more so than anything on the card, like on this main card, especially, right? Like Bo Nickal and Cody Brundage lives in its own world when it comes to this main card. Oliveira is a superstar as well, but Arman Sarukian probably has some work to do. You guys just talked about the main and the co-mains. Both of these guys are probably 2 of the most beloved fighters in the entire sport. So this brings it on both ends of the spectrum.
This is the fun one, right?
This is
To
a
me,
fun one. Yeah,
yeah, this is
absolutely.
look, the main event, the co-main event, they make sense, right? When you look at statistics, when you look at streaks, all that stuff, they make sense. This is the one that we're just tuning in for fun. This is what separates UFC 300 from other cards. So I'm down. I think it's people's main event.
100%. It's the people's main event. I mean, this is the type of fight that you would put together with your friends, talking at a bar. Like this fight is amazing. The only thing that doesn't sit well with me, and I don't know about you guys, but I don't know about the whole BMF title being in place here. The fact that it's being defended again, like Mike said, I think the Diaz and Masvidal made sense. But now I feel like, what is the BMF, right? Like, because yes, these two are scary as shit once they're in the octagon. But outside of it, I mean, we've all been around them, right? We've interviewed them. They're some of the nicest people we've in this sport, literally, Max Holloway and Justin Gaethje. So what is this BMF thing? And at the same time, you're putting it on top of what you've labeled a title eliminator, and we'll get to that in a second. Oliveira and Sarukian. Like, what importance does it have here in the division? And I just feel like this whole BMF thing is a bit unconclusive. We don't know what the future is. Is this the last title defense of it? Is he just going to keep defending the BMF belt? I don't know. That doesn't sit well with me. But 155, Gaethje, Holloway, absolutely love it. You can't complain about that.
The other two were 4 years apart from each other, and it almost just seemed like, it was the right time. You know, Gaethje, Poirier, two gangsters. The other two, they were gangsters. But then all of a sudden, this one kind of came in, and I think it had to do with we say it all the time, the schedule that the UFC keeps and what they need. Sometimes they have to create stuff. That's why I've always championed just close the weight classes at 65, 75. You know, you'll add another belt that way, and then you don't have to do this BMF thing. And I think the BMF thing worked when it was right. Has to feel right. Right now, title defense. Just tell me Gaethje and Max are fighting, I guess, because Gaethje wasn't next for Makhachev because he was injured or because of Ramadan or whatever. But title defense, I don't know. I do like, though, and it's been pointed out that I guess the pay-per-view points do hit one of these guys, or
I mean, at the end of the day, it's a gimmick,
like more money
right?
in pocket.
Like the UFC doesn't do a ton of gimmicks, but this is one that they brought in out of the necessity that you kind of laid off. Like, I don't think this would have been brought back if they had an appropriate headliner for Salt Lake City with a real fight in a real weight class, a real title fight for that card. But they needed a main event for that second pay-per-view in July of last year. The thing worked and they brought it back. Masvidal had retired. So like, it was just a circumstance, something to attach to make it seem like there is a championship fight on the card. This one, you can say there's 3 title fights. Like it's very much a gimmick, but man, like, tell me Justin Gaethje isn't someone who well represents what this belt, I guess, was supposed to be. Maybe, as Danny said, like the side of him as a person, maybe not, but like as a fighter, come on.
As a fighter, yes, but I do feel like you have to have at least one battery charge in there, or at least a couple recorded street brawls here and there, right? Like in a backyard in Miami somewhere. I do feel like that's fitting, man. But I want to ask you guys, because I generally have no idea what's at stake here. Because, like, again, this is the first ever title defense of the BMF belt. Like, what's the future going to look like? And I wonder, because there's so much attention to this fight, if the winner does something impressive. We've seen title eliminator bouts not be title eliminator bouts. I love Oliveira. I love Sarukian, but I don't think it's too crazy to think that the winner here could go on and fight for the belt next. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Man, UFC's crazy. They'll do some crazy things, but if Max Holloway gets a win here, that's kind of a tough pill to swallow, especially because, you know, the division below, we want him there. We want him to fight Topuria. So I don't know that something like that would happen. But, you know, it is interesting what you're saying, like what can actually happen with this belt, because when I sit back and I think, like, I don't know how many of you guys last night watched WrestleMania. I'm not the biggest wrestling fan, but they drew me in with their storyline. And when I was watching that, I couldn't help but notice this new era, right? Without Vince McMahon. You saw a logo in the middle of the ring. You don't see that. You saw a lot of advertisement. You have to think that the UFC and their business is probably influencing a little bit of what's going on over there in WWE. And I think the same thing can happen coming back the other way. And I think that's why this BMF thing, that seems like something that would happen, right? In WWE, the hardcore title, all these weird titles that they have. I think they're going to kind of play off each other. And to answer your question, Danny, I think it's going to be a while before we know exactly what this is going to be, because I think they're kind of trying it out and seeing how we are all going to react to this. But title-wise, it's so tough, man. Like, they really put themselves in a pickle and they really stretch things out for us. But I'd rather see Max Holloway go down to 145, even with the win.
The easiest way, guys, is let's unpack it like this. Let's just say Gaethje wins. What happens, Mike? How does 55 shake out?
Well, he already told me the other day, turning around for June 1st, if they want to put Islam Makhachev on that card, UFC 302 in Newark, he's highly unlikely to do that, even if he goes out there and takes no damage and knocks Max Holloway out in the first round or something. That would just be a lot. It's 7 weeks to the day. And we've heard Justin Gaethje say many, many times, I need a full camp. I take my preparation seriously. I don't do short notice fights, et cetera, especially in this circumstance where this is going to be his final undisputed lightweight title shot. You would have to imagine. He lost to Khabib. He lost to Oliveira. He's done the work, especially if he wins this fight, but you'd have to imagine that's do or die for him. So he's not going to take it, I don't think, under unideal circumstances, which opens up, as we saw, Islam Makhachev calling out Dustin Poirier for that card. Maybe he gets the shot. But what Gaethje said in his perfect world was the winner of Oliveira and Sarukian ideally comes out unscathed of their fight. They fight Makhachev on June 1st, and then he fights the winner of that at Madison Square Garden in New York. That was in November. That was his perfect world scenario. And maybe it could happen. He dropped a line being like, if Charles wins, hopefully he doesn't shit the bed again, meaning pull out of the fight, not take the fight on the date the UFC wants, et cetera, et cetera. If all this happens, like let's say Poirier gets the fight in June, and then who knows what happens there, right? Like who gets the second fight with Makhachev later this year, either in New York or Abu Dhabi, wherever he fights? Will it be Gaethje if he wins? Will it be the winner of Sarukian versus Oliveira? The person who doesn't get it is going to be pissed off. So there is a lot of moving puzzle pieces here. I don't know how close they are to booking the UFC 302 main event because tickets for that card go on sale Friday. And we know the UFC likes to have main events in place more often than not when putting tickets on sale for a card. So I don't know, like, are they going to be pressured into making the Dustin fight happen, or are they going to try to extend this a little bit, see what happens on Saturday? Maybe the winner of one of these two lightweight fights comes out completely unscathed and they convince them to make a 7-week turnaround. But it's going to be tricky here. Yeah, I think you just got to win your fight. Hopefully you come out healthy as possible and see what happens.
Danny, what happens if Max wins?
Oof, I honestly think that's the best result for the sport. It'll make things super exciting at 155 because all of a sudden you have, tons of matchups available, right? Like him, potentially a trilogy with Poirier if we're interested, Connor, Chandler. There's so many fights that make sense. Or he could even win and just go, okay, Ilia Topuria, yeah, you beat the champion, but did you beat the baddest motherfucker? No, here I got a belt to prove it. Let's go, you and me, 145. I just kicked some ass at 155. Thank you for holding the belt. I'll be there in a second. See you in Spain. I think that would be the most exciting result for the sport. But, man, Gaethje is so hard to beat. So I think if Holloway wins, man, it's a party at 155 and 145. I think things just get really, really interesting.
All right, we want to focus on 55, but I want to include the chat, and this person made an attempt here. We'll stick with Danny. Making the Walk MMA says, we know what happens if Max wins. He has hella options. What happens if he loses? What are the best options? I think what he means is, can he come off a loss in an exciting fight against Gaethje and still make a run at Topuria, or does this somehow affect 45, or do they decompartmentalize? What's your take here?
I think it affects him a little bit. Obviously, if you get a win, it's far more convincing to get a title shot, especially where there are other contenders there. Obviously, the immediate rematch with Volkanovski, Evloev is out there as well. So I think it's possible that he could get a title shot off a loss, especially if it's a competitive one. But it definitely hurts his chances. I think at that point, Volkanovski would be the front runner to get a rematch.
The chat's blowing up. I'm telling you, this is the people's main event. Karate Ted Toon says Max is very aggressive lately and will brawl with Justin instead of being the smartest boxer. Stick and move or get hit and lose. RTTV says Max versus Justin is definitely the main event. UFC done messed up. Todd, here's a nice little joke. We got to move on. All right, listen, guys, let's talk. Yeah, he's been cracking this joke for a while. The intruder against Anthony Smith. I get it. It's not a bad one, but we got to focus on 55 here. Mike, Sarukian and Oliveira. Is Oliveira in any form of a doghouse because of him not stepping up. I mean, it was a cut. He really did have the cut. But remember, there was other times when he was suggesting a fight night in Brazil instead of going to Abu Dhabi. So let's say he just starts with Sarukian. Is he now present a valid case for next?
Oh, come on. Yeah, of course he's got a valid case. He probably deserves it right now, but yeah, he definitely shot himself in the foot a little bit last year, not only pulling out of the title fight in Abu Dhabi on 12 days notice, but he did pull out of the fight originally against Beneil Dariush that was supposed to take place in New Jersey, right, in May. And that's why they ended up having to put Bilal Muhammad and Gilbert Burns on that card on very short notice. It did get rebooked like 2 months later for the Vancouver card, or a month later, but still you're causing the UFC to scramble. It's all that stuff. He pulled out 2 fights last year. It needs to be said. So I get why he had to take another one.
A concussion too.
There was a lot of all this that we're talking about, the BMF title, all these things that are happening right now. Dustin Poirier maybe getting a shot, this, that, the other thing. They're all because Charles Oliveira pulled out of that fight with Islam Makhachev in October, right? Like, if not, we're probably not getting the BMF title fight on this card because Gaethje would have had his title shot probably in February already or March. So the whole thing is kind of the aftermath of what Charles Oliveira did there. So I would maybe understand if he's a little bit in the doghouse, but at the end of the day, he is one of the most beloved fighters in the sport, one of the most decorated fighters in the sport. I don't need to list all his records. We know how amazing his resume is. So he goes out there, wins another one. He's ready, available. I think he's very much in the running for a shot. I mean, you're comparing him to, if we assume Justin Gaethje wins here, he's got the head-to-head win over Justin Gaethje not that long ago. So he's got the good case for it. It's just, again, with all these things, timing, situations, et cetera, et cetera. But I would have zero issues with Charles Oliveira getting the next shot after this if he wins.
Let's give a good case scenario. Sarukian waxes Oliveira. Can he leapfrog Poirier and Gaethje? Let's say Gaethje wins, right? Or Max, whatever. But can he leapfrog all of these people? Or is he just kind of a side piece right now? You know, like, yeah, it's a title fight, but really the spotlight's on Oliveira.
You know what I think is massively important here, no matter who wins these fights, is that mic time in front of one of the largest audiences of all time. If you say the right things,
win the crowd.
People will start, win the crowd. I think they'll start to consider it. But when it's all said and done, I mean, if Justin Gaethje, like, I feel like it kind of hurt him a little bit just to say no right from the get-go. I probably would have just waited just to see. Maybe you walk in there and you knock him out with the first punch, and maybe 7 weeks doesn't seem as bad, right? I don't know. I feel like maybe he could make a better case for himself, but I don't think he can leapfrog, man. I just don't think that at the end of the day, I don't think that's the fight that everybody wants.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Danny? What's your take on this whole mess? Can Sarukian cause something that's him the win? Being flexible and being ready, and a vicious finish, and then mic time, not just post-fight, but come on, these guys need to put on a show. I'm expecting a lot at the pre-fight as well.
Yeah, I think this pretty much this UFC 300 card is more or less on audition to see who gets Makhachev. I do think any of the winners here can get it. Day one would have a win over a good name, a solid opponent, and two, I mean, depending on what that they say on that mic, what interest they cost in the champion. Let's not forget, I think Sarukian likely has or gave Islam Makhachev his toughest fight, apart from that, that one loss against Pantoja, of course. But yeah, I think this would be a fantastic fight. So between Sarukian and Makhachev. So I think it's possible that he could leapfrog everyone if he were to beat Charles Oliveira. So super interesting stuff at 155. I just kind of want to know, what I'm curious is who has the best shot at beating Makhachev. And believe it or not, I think it's going to be Sarukian. I think out of all the 4 main lightweights competing at UFC 300, I think the guy with the best shot to beat Makhachev is going to be Sarukian, in my opinion.
Could be. Some other great action happening at 155 pounds. Mike Moicano versus Turner. This one's got like a fight of the night feel written all over. I know there's some great fights, so it's tough to really say two fighters are the favorite for that. But you know what I'm saying, right?
Is the fight of the night going to be 3,000 or what?
That's up to you. Aren't you the one that made the pitch for 200K or something like that?
That's up to Dana White. I'm not counting out, but sorry, go on. I interrupted you there.
Yeah, Turner and Moicano, man. What do you see? Is this the bloody brawl of the night?
I don't know. It's so hard to predict. I mean, we just talked about freaking Justin Gaethje and Max Holloway in a Charles Oliveira fight, so it's hard for me to be like, this is going to be the best lightweight fight of the night. I
Moicano's
love
a bleeder. I love that guy. He's scrappy. He's a bleeder. He makes
I
it
love
interesting.
Moicano too, but I think we just saw in his last fight that if he needs to, he is willing to take a risk-averse path to victory, right? And Jalen Turner, like, this is pretty clear where one guy is the best, and Jalen Turner is probably the superior striker here, and Moicano is the better grappler submission guy. So you could get to a stalemate, a one-sided fight, something like that in this sense. It's just a matter of how it goes down. But yeah, the potential's there. Anytime you have two ranked lightweights fighting, like, it's going to be good. How often do those fights turn out badly, no matter who you take out of those rankings and puck in that octagon? So I'm expecting a good fight.
Danny, does the winner of that fight maybe get someone that loses one of these other fights that we've discussed at the top of 155? Kind of like a graduation of a higher ranked fighter. Do you think that that's their next move as well? So some important for both guys here?
100%. I do think the winner here kind of automatically becomes the dark horse of the 155 division. I mean, Moicano's got world-class skills. Turner has physical abilities that no other lightweight has. So I do feel like the winner here is going to get a big step up. And that's what I feel like these two guys have always been waiting for. Like, they're kind of popular with the fan base, especially Moicano. They're very skilled, but they've yet to break into that sort of Justin Gaethje, Dustin Poirier, Michael Chandler territory. But I don't think that's too far off. A win here at UFC 300, massive card, good promo, especially if it's Moicano. Dude, people are going to be clamoring for a big fight for either guy next. So yes, 100%. This is a huge moment for both.
Goes Jim fucking Miller's on this card.
Yes, sir.
I mean, like that poster, Miller was on that fight card. He was on 200 where Mike Bond suggested they give out 200K. I love that, Mike, by the way, to all the bonus winners. And now he's on this one. And Bobby Green, another OG of the sport. We saw him at Affliction in 2009 when he was a youngster, a young pup. Now he's a vet. Tell me about this fight, what it means for both guys.
Well, I mean, Jim Miller, he's talked about how close he's been to just kind of hanging it up at times. And really, I think this is the type of fight that's going to prove a lot, right? Like, he's a guy that you should never count out in a fight, no matter what his age is, whatever. He's just a crafty veteran. He can get in there and he can pull off a W. But you look at a guy like Bobby Green, and it's a little similar in the sense that he's spent almost his entire career trying to prove everyone that they're wrong. He's always the underdog. He's always the guy that people say, well, we don't know. I feel like Bobby's attack is controlled chaos, right? If he can keep it dialed in and not get wrapped up in the moment, the fact that he's fighting on UFC 300 against Jim fucking Miller, if he can keep it dialed in, I think he should just be quicker than Jim Miller. I think he should beat him to the punch. I think he'll be a little bit too much for Jim Miller. If Jim Miller, I think, look, he can't give Bobby Green any room to breathe. He can't give him room to do anything. He's got to get in his face and try and get a hold of him. But I think this is one of those other fun fights that I wouldn't want to say there's a whole lot on the line for either guy, but it's just a fun fight that we all want to see.
Mike, should this be Jim Miller's swan song, win or lose? You've covered the sport for a while. You've seen a lot of these. Does this almost have like that feeling of, this could be it?
It does feel like a pretty perfect moment to walk away, right? But if he wins, this would be his most high-profile win in a while. He'd be on a nice little run here. So I don't know how many fights he has left on his contract, if he's maybe due for a raise. These kind of things, right, are all intangibles when it comes to something like this. So, yeah, if he wins in a pretty clean, convincing fashion, I think he goes on. I do think he is keen on that idea of making it to 50 UFC fights. That would be another 5 after this. So maybe it happens. We'll have to see how this fight plays out. A lot of interesting questions about both these guys, right? Like, what's Bobby Green going to be like after taking that absolutely hellacious overdue stoppage against Jalen Turner? That's one that could completely change you and your durability and all that stuff as a fighter. So I'm curious to see, like, if Jim Miller goes out there and one punch KOs him or something. I think we wonder a lot of questions about Bobby Green's future, even more so than Jim Miller's maybe after this fight. So yeah, a lot on the line for both this guy, but Jim Miller, I mean, to me, in a way, like, the results almost don't even matter for him anymore. Like, him just going out there and continuing this Iron Man streak of having all these fights is impressive. But yeah, if he can up that all-time UFC win record to 27, that would be pretty amazing. And then we can start talking about maybe being the first fighter to ever reach 30 UFC wins, which would be a whole other level of achievement. So we'll see what happens.
And Danny, you saw Cold Coffee doesn't have to dig for Jim Miller highlights. That guy, the one thing he just doesn't slow down. Notice no one really says Father Time. We're just more than anything just saying, wow, he's been a lot of scraps. I guess could it be time, but no one's really saying he's dropped. So your thoughts on his longevity and how rare it is at 155?
Yeah, there's very few guys that, and I feel like Rafael dos Anjos is a good example. Like they're prime and then they have a drop, but then they kind of just hit a plateau and they just still remain a very, very good fighter. I think you can say that for dos Anjos, you can say that for Miller, you can say that for Jose Aldo at the end. So it's damn impressive. Like, dude, he fought at UFC 100, he fought at UFC 200, and now 300. I mean, I can just sit here and just praise Jim Miller for the entirety of this episode. Because he's Jim fucking Miller, right? Like this guy is a legend. But I would like to say I would love to see him retire if he were to pick up a win over Bobby Green. Dude, he'd be 6-1 in his last 7 fights, UFC 300. Bobby Green is a top dude as well. Like he's been around for a while. It's a good name to leave, as Mike said, probably the best win he's had in some time. I don't know. I've just seen so many bad retirements, losing streaks or getting kicked out of the UFC, etc. That like whenever you can have the option of a nice send off, you should take it. And I feel like 40 years old, it's time. He's still looking good, but that's probably why you want to walk away at this point in time, right? I don't know what his financials are because that's a whole thing, but man, it would just be perfect for Jim Miller, a good guy of the sport, to get such a nice send off UFC 300, Bobby Green. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, legend.
Narrator voice. They never walk away at the right time. So I wouldn't
sadly.
Mike, you got any clips headed your way? You got some packing to do because you'll be in Vegas covering the event for us. So thank you for always being the workhorse, one of our workhorses there at MMA Junkie. I know you'll be seeing the guys out there. Thanks for stopping by, Mike. Take care, man. Safe flight.
Appreciate it. Looking forward to it. We have a 26-person media day and a 26-person press conference on Thursday. So everyone get ready for that. See you guys later.
All right. And of course, we're going to transition. The Junkie team is deep. We got a lot of talent. I want to welcome our international superstar reporter, Farah Hanoun. Farah, welcome to Spinning Back Clique. Been a few weeks since we had you on. Always great to see you. I know the chat room is going to blow up. All right, so let's talk about the big free agent signing that the UFC had that I wouldn't say got swept under the rug, but she's a star. She's a 2-time Olympic gold medalist. She's a world champion at PFL, has an excellent record. I mean, even the person that hung an L on her, she's beaten her twice. So she comes over and she's got Holly Holm, and that's a high-profile fight against the former champion. Yet somehow, I guess, it didn't make the main card. I think we've all given our takes. I'm not sure if I've heard yours on that one. Are you okay with Bo Nickal and not Kayla Harrison on the main card?
I mean, I think it should be Kayla Harrison versus Holly Holm just because of the significance of the fight. They've also got the name value, and also there could be big title implications. Don't say that to Juliana Penny, of course, but there could be big title implications with a Kayla Harrison win. So yeah, that's probably the fight that I would have expected on the main card. I understand why Bo Nickal's on there. They see a potential future champion and whatnot. So it's just building him and kind of the UFC investing in Bo Nickal. It's just the dance partner, and that's no disrespect to Cody Brundage. I think he knows what's at stake and how much he could capitalize from a spot like that. But just because the dance partner, it's not a fight where you've got two guys that are in the rankings or anything like that. So I think that would be the only thing. But I don't absolutely hate her or anything. Card is absolutely stacked, and I think anybody could have been that main card opener. It could have been Yuri and Rakic. It could have been Aljamain and Calvin Kattar. Could have been anyone. So I don't necessarily absolutely hate it.
How big of a free agent signing was this for the UFC? Comparing it to the other ones we've had in the past.
Oh, it's huge, and it's perfect timing. I think that's what the great thing about this is. When you look at the bantamweight division, we just, Amanda Nunes retiring, and we just had that vacant bantamweight title fight between Raquel Pennington and Mairo Bueno Silva. I know there was some criticism surrounding that fight, although Raquel was on a nice winning streak and whatnot. But this is perfect timing in terms of name value, and Kayla being able to make a big impact. Of course, we heard her interview with Mike Bond, and she was talking about how, UFC basically told her it had to be bantamweight because obviously there's no longer a featherweight division. I don't think they want to go back there. So she knows she's got a tough cut ahead of her. Everyone's doubting her cut, the likes of the champion Raquel and Juliana. And you've seen, all these interviews that the women's bantamweights have done, talking about them not thinking that she's going to be able to perform well. Chris Cyborg also had her comments about how she could lose her speed. So there's a lot of pressure on Kayla Harrison to not only perform well, but to show up and look good against Holly Holm. But, a win here and, sky's the limit for her in terms of how far she can go in the UFC. Absolutely has the potential of being one of the bigger names. And it's a much needed signing for women's bantamweight. I think the timing's perfect.
Is that the right dance partner? Did they choose the right one, Danny, for Kayla Harrison?
Yeah, I mean, Holly Holm right now is probably the most recognizable name right now in as far as like UFC women's bantamweight division. So I do think this is the right matchup. I think beating her, I mean, just sends a big message in the division. Sure, Holly Holm might not be the same Holly Holm of a few years ago, but she's still, I think, top 10 quality at the very least, probably closer to like top 6, top 5. So I think this is the right partner. What I am curious about is the weight. I don't know if this is Kayla Harrison's optimal weight. Like we'll see. This is the first time ever that she'll make 135 pounds for an MMA fight. So I love it. I think it's time for her to make the jump to the UFC. I love the fact that she's fighting a big name like Holly Holm. But I just don't know if 135 is the weight class. So I think they got everything right about this matchup. Just the weight class, I guess we'll see. But I'm curious to know what Ghost thinks about this one because we've seen when they try to force Cyborg down to 135 and she was doing the 140. That didn't turn out so well. But again, Kayla is the type of girl that, if she wants to make something, she'll make something happen. So maybe it is.
And Goes, how excited were we for Patricio Freire when he dropped to 35? He didn't look that great. He looked great at 45, went up to 55, and the power still held up. But when he went downward, we were all canceling Sergio Pettis before the fight even started, and it sure as hell didn't go down like that. What Danny's saying, what do you think, man? Could this be the weight class where maybe she's just not the Kayla Harrison we've seen?
Yeah, man, I think this is kind of a nightmare scenario for Kayla Harrison because, like Danny said, that's a big deal. It's like buying a new car. All of the gadgets are all the same, right? You still have a gas pedal, you still have a brake, you still have steering, but it doesn't handle the same. It takes you a while to figure that out. She has to figure that out in a new organization, okay, on the biggest card of all time. There is a lot of pressure on Kayla Harrison right now. If you look at it, yes, this is a big signing, right? On paper, it's huge, but it's a little different than what we're used to. When they signed Eddie Alvarez, when they signed Michael Chandler, we knew that these guys, based on some of the fighters they fought, these were not just good fighters, they were great fighters, okay? With Kayla Harrison, we're still kind of figuring out. We know that she's good, but is she great? We need to figure that out by putting her up against UFC opposition. This is a ton of pressure on her. It's 2 fights, guys. It's a fight against the scale, and it's a fight against Holly Holm. And Holly Holm has been in this situation before, right? Like, this is a big cage. This is somebody who also flourished in 2 different sports, okay? That's a different mentality. It's a huge cage. She's got excellent footwork. She can take her time. There is a lot against Kayla Harrison in this fight. But if Kayla can pull it off, man, she can put herself in a really nice spot. And we know how charismatic she is. The second she gets that mic, I think she can cut an excellent promo. And maybe she does put a little pressure on Juliana Pena.
I will say this though, and I'm just kind of reflecting on what I said. I know that the weight class is a little bit questionable, but there is a plus to it. I do think that at this point in time, the UFC is more in need of Kayla Harrison than Kayla Harrison in need of the UFC. Kayla Harrison has done so much for the sport, has legacy in judo, PFL champion, has made a ton of money. Right now, the UFC women's bantamweight division is in a very, very poor state. Probably the worst it's been since the start of the weight class. So I do feel like injecting Kayla Harrison into the mix is a must for the division of flurry and to flourish. Sorry, and I do think that in that case, Kayla Harrison does have a lot of leverage because the UFC needs a name like her in that division. So The weight cut and the technicality might be a little bit questionable, but in terms of just looking at it as a business thing, I do think there are pluses for her to be fighting at 135. So I didn't want to seem too grim. So there's the positive side of it.
Fada, Kayla is gold on the mic. You know, Juliana's a good talker as well. So they have a few options when it comes to building a fight. The champ, Raquel, she's a little bit more chill. She just lets the fist do the talking. She's been around the sport for a long time. Respect to her. But, you know, I think back to when Askren came over. I think Robbie Lawler was a hitman. You know, he was supposed to do the job and send Askren packing. It was kind of personal between Dana and Askren. What do you think's happening here, this matchup? Why was it built with Holly? Is it basically maybe just Holly's got a name and it'll put Kayla over? Holly maybe has what it takes to beat Kayla. How are you kind of viewing how this matchup was built? Do you think that if Kayla gets through all this, she's just gonna be the one who, and she's already been chirping, by the way, back and forth with the champ, that she gets next?
She could very well, and I think them matching her up with Holly Holm is exactly that, a notable name, a former champion. So a win for Kayla, I mean, it speaks to what Danny was saying before, that the division kind of needs a name like Kayla, and that's why I called it a perfect signing at a perfect timing. So I think by them matching her up with Holly Holm, especially on a card like UFC 300, it's perfect in my opinion. And Holly has a ton of experience. She's got a win over, 2 wins over Raquel Pennington, who's the current champion. She's fought the who's who in women's MMA in general, from Cyborg to Ronda, you name it, Amanda Nunes. So she's got a ton of experience. Having a name like Holly Holm on your resume is a big deal. So if Kayla Harrison can get past Holly, I know a lot of people are going to say that Holly's up there in age. She's not in her prime. She's not the Holly Holm who knocked out Ronda Rousey. Fair enough. All of these are very valid points. But you have to remember, this is Kayla Harrison's UFC debut. This is going to be considered a step up in competition compared to the athletes she's been fighting at PFL. So I think it's a good fight. I think it's got all those attributes that she needs. And yes, if Kayla Harrison can go out there and look dominant and look impressive, because it's not necessarily that easy to dominate Holly Holm. Holly Holm is tricky. Her footwork is tricky. At the end of the day, if both these girls are able to implement their game plans, it might not turn out to be the most entertaining fight, because if Holly's able to stay on the outside, stick and move, because that's what she's going to want to do, right? She's not going to want to clinch and get close to Kayla Harrison. She's going to want to circle. She's going to want to touch her from the outside, blitz in and out. So in that way, I think if Holly Holm is successful in her game plan, it might not be the most entertaining fight. And if Kayla just takes her down and isn't vicious and gets a vicious finish, I think that could harm her chances too. So I think it all depends on how the fight plays out. But I think if Kayla Harrison can go out there and put a dominant performance against Holly Holm, which isn't necessarily an easy thing to do. Holly Holm doesn't often get dominated. I think that could propel her forward. And again, I know Juliana's going to have something to say about that, but I think it's all going to depend on how she looks against Holly Holm.
Goes in the chat, the comparisons are being made to Ronda. Again, that fight was, I think we're pushing 8 or 9 years, right? But Kayla's got the judo background like Ronda. They're saying that Ronda, you know, just didn't have the formidable striking to really put any fear into Holm. Did Kayla develop that to go along with the judo? And mixing that with now Holm is just older. Is there a path to victory through, you know, striking to set up the judo, or does she go straight to the ground?
I mean, there is, but she's got to cover a lot of distance. You know, if Holly's smart, she'll use that jab, she'll pump that jab and keep her away and circle out. And it's going to be difficult the more and more that fight goes on, and the more and more things aren't going Kayla Harrison's way. There's more room, there's more margin for error. But can Kayla do it? Can she close the distance and get a hold of her? Yeah. But I'm going to say this, like, if she doesn't get that takedown right away and Holly can fight her off, that might be that first mini battle, that first demoralizing thing that happens to her in that fight, and it could lead to a downfall. But she can do it. It's just, it's tough, man. It's a tall order here.
Everyday Preacher in the chat room says Holm head kicks Harrison. I can't wait till the staff picks come out on Friday at MMA Junkie. Let's go around the horn real quick, guys. 10, 15 seconds. Who wins this matchup? Danny, Harrison, and Holm. Come on, tell us right now.
I just feel like anything that Kayla Harrison sets her mind to, she's going to be successful. She's just that kind of person. So I'm going to go with Kayla Harrison. I do have questions about the weight cut, but I'm going to go with Kayla Harrison. Yeah, that's my pick.
How about you, Ghost? Do you have questions about the weight cut and who wins?
Too many questions going in, so I'm going to stick with Holly on this one.
Really? Okay. And
Mhm.
Fada, let's close with you. Is the weight cut? You think there's any problems? I mean, Kayla is as professional as it gets. It doesn't seem like she leaves any stone unturned. And then, of course, let's finish out with your prediction as well.
Someone mentioned it earlier in the chat, and I want to shout them out. But they said basically that she has started lighter, and that's a good point. Like, it's not like this is sprung up on her. She started lighter, so obviously she's taking the weight cut very seriously. Is it going to be hard? Do I expect it to potentially impact her? But this is not a 5-round fight, so because it's a 3-round fight, I think I'm leaning Kayla.
All right. Josh Wallace is saying anyone that doesn't think Kayla's going to win, you a fool. He says Kayla will win. I'll tell you who's not a fool. Fada Hanoun. She's one of the best in the business. We're lucky to have her covering the sport all the way from the other side of the world. I don't know if you're getting any clips at all, Fada. I think your eyes are just going to close because it's almost midnight for you. So thank you for staying up late and doing this with us. And hopefully we'll see you soon on a future Spinning Back Clique.
Guys.
All right. And then, of course, we're going to transition. It's time to talk about Bo Nickal. Yeah, I've been grinding that axe a little bit. I don't think my man deserves the spot, but it's here. So we turn the page, we celebrate it, we preview it, we talk about it. No one better to talk about when it comes to rising stars, because this guy spots them a long time ago, and then he breaks them down, and he knows all the details. Dan Tom, he's got a great podcast, Protect Your Neck. He's been doing it for years. Taking a little bit of a break while he went to Thailand and sharpened up his own skills. He's fought before. He's trained. He's got black belts. He's a stud. What's up, Dan? How are you? Looking great.
Hey,
man.
what's going on, man? I appreciate the compliments, and I'm definitely no Bernard Hopkins, but I'll be the executioner if you're grinding the axe, because we probably have some similar talking points. But I'm excited to chop it up with you, nonetheless.
Well, let's start with that then. Yeah. Who would you have put instead of Nickal and Brundage?
Oh, easy. Jim Miller versus Bobby Green. For one,
What?
it's the Joe Silva lightweight tried and true method. You can't go wrong with lightweights. Perhaps off the top of my head, maybe there's another lightweight fight on the prelims, but absolutely, this guy's paid his dues. You want to talk about paying your dues? Jim Miller has paid his dues. This company's been built on the back of guys like Jim Miller, who've been there 100 in the prelims. UFC 200, opening up the show as the curtain jerker. Let's give this guy a main card. I mean, he shouldn't be here. It's like the thing I always say, folks, like celebrating guys like Pantoja or DuBronx while they're on top. They shouldn't be here, folks. And guys like Jim Miller, guys like anybody, girls like anybody, should not be here for this many UFCs, folks. Respect.
Dan,
Right.
I just want to make sure you're aware that Kayla Harrison is making her debut against Holly Holm on this card, right? Making sure you didn't forget about that one.
I would definitely put that over Bo Nickal and Cody Brundage, to your point, Danny. But my Jim Miller fandom, it'll probably be like here and here, but the Jim Miller fandom definitely tips it over for me. But also to your point, promotionally, if they wanted to go the promotional card and away from the hardcore fan taste, which I totally get, to your point, Danny, that makes much more sense, right?
Yeah.
I think Jim Miller's
That was
earned it,
questionable.
man.
Go ahead. Go. Sorry.
I think he's earned it, dude. What he's done, what Dan said, like what he's done has been absolutely phenomenal. In a way, he is like Mr. 300. Like to get to this point, I thought he deserved a spot on the main card just for that.
Honestly, you guys might have won me over. So yeah, maybe I'll back that up.
Dan, is Cody Brundage the right step up for Bo Nickal at this point in his career? Like he said, he goes, I think he hasn't faced anyone as tough as me. He told Goz and I that. He says, I train with Anthony Smith. I train with Rob Wilkinson, and a few other killers over there in Denver. And he's saying, I don't think I'd be as big of an underdog with them, and I can hang with them.
I do think Cody Brundage is, always a live underdog, especially, you're going to put this big of a number next to him, right? We've seen him get finishes in the first round. I know that Malkoun one, may be a little deceptive if you're just reading it off the record, but the guy trains with legit talent. And, I've definitely, backed him as an underdog before. And I will say, even though I am vehemently against, middleweights and anything above middleweight opening up a card. I mean, again, men's featherweight, men's lightweight, your problem is solved. It's the perfect balance. You need to think no more about it. However, kicking it off with Cody Brundage's walkout song, a guy comes out to Mariah Carey. I mean, sign me up. I mean, that is one benefit I will say of this matchup coming up first. We're going to start the main card with some sweet jams because I imagine Brundage will be making the walk first.
Is that your go-to karaoke, Dan?
Oh, I can't get those highs. I'm a sloppy baritone at best. I can't get the Mariah Carey highs in that song. Don't even make me try.
Dan, I know you like people to pay their dues in this sport. We can't just give them their flowers too early, but is Nickal got future champ? Does that hype belong to him just yet? Have you kind of seen it when you've broken this guy down?
Now, even though, I want to jump right into my critiques of the matchmaking and not be, the cheerleader. We're media. I'm an analyst, so I got to, be unbiased. I can't be, the UFC's PR cheerleader or whatnot, for these things. But what I will say regarding middleweight, as much as I tend to crap and kind of take some shots at it, it is the division. Maybe you could count this as taking another shot at it, but maybe it's backhanded compliment. But it is the division where you could still be a specialist, right? Like you could still be a Ronda Rousey and get to the top, which, it says some things about the division, right? Whether you're a specialist striker, as we've seen, or even just like a specialist submission guy, you can get pretty far, right? Going, back to the days of Damian Maia, you might not get to the title, but you can get all the way up to a title shot, if you are a specialist of sorts. So the fact that Bo Nickal is a specialist in the grappling department, he can actually add some submissions to his wrestling as well. Like, yeah, I mean, I could definitely see him as a champ, but at the same time, here I am crapping on 185 again. I don't know how impressive that is to say. It's not like we're talking about lightweight or bantamweight here, right?
Mm-hmm. What do you think, Danny? Has the UFC gotten ahead of themselves? This guy's on the main card, and apparently the numbers do pop. But goddamn, just because the numbers pop, he might just be a charming fella. He is a stud in the collegiate world. I get all that, right? And he has gone out there and done his job, but do you think he's a future champion? Do you think they're seeing him as that, or just cha-ching, he registers?
He's definitely a star in the making. He's already a star in the wrestling world, and I think he's going to be a future star in MMA as far as like, headlining events, fight nights, this and that, and just being an important player at 185. Champion, I do think if you want to make early predictions, I think this is a fighter that is good in putting in that category. But to be 100% certain, I want to see more. I want to see, we know the wrestling's there, but I want to see a little bit more of the striking. I want to see a little bit more of composure. I want to see a little bit of fight management, right? Not just go, it just feels like he kind of just goes in there, bulldozes his opponent, and it's great. You can do that because you're so good. But what happens when you cannot? Can you implement a game plan? Can you have different strategies? Can you have plan A, plan B? That's what I want to see from Bo Nickal. So,
almost like Hamza, like when he started showing some chinks in
Right.
the armor against Burns, and
very similar,
and
very
Usman,
similar.
like, let's see what you really got, and so we can kind of gauge if you are championship material. Is that what you're talking about?
Exactly. For Hamza, we've pretty much only seen one gear, but at least we've seen it against high-level opponents. Like beating Kamaru Usman tells you something, right? Like I don't care if you're a little bit bigger than him, whatever it is. If you beat that guy, period. If you're a heavyweight and you beat that guy, you must know something. You must be doing something right. Kamaru Usman is a complete stud. Same thing with Kevin Holland and other opponents he's faced in the past. Bo Nickal's not there yet. All the names that he's faced are decent, but not high caliber. Certainly not former UFC champions. So I just want to see a little bit more fight management. I just want to see a little bit of the gears turning in his head once they're in the fight and less of the instinct, because that's what we've seen so far. Just the instinct, the raw talent. I want to see some of that smart.
Because when we talked to Brundage, he seemed confident and he didn't seem to have a chip on his shoulder about the fact that he's getting overlooked. We talked about the odds between Little Nog and Sokoju. We told him about the UFC 300 promo, and you can hear Joe Rogan saying this is the biggest upset ever in the show. And Matt, Sarah, how big of an upset would this be if he takes out Bo Nickal on this huge stage that is UFC 300?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I don't know that it would be the hugest thing of all time, because I think the odds are just inflated in Bo Nickal's favor way too much. This is mixed martial arts, and Bo Nickal just doesn't have a huge history of mixed martial arts for us to be doing that. Cody Brundage, he packs a punch. It could happen, right? But chances are, I kind of like where Bo Nickal is, where he's going. I think he earned the right to be on UFC 300, maybe not the right to be on the main card, but I see a lot of things in him that I saw in an early Daniel Cormier and the development of his game. I just think every fight he's going to get better and better. If it happens, better it happen now than later.
Mm-hmm. Dan, before we let you go, aside from this Bo Nickal fight, I got to take advantage of the fact that we have you here. What's just something people need to look out for at UFC 300? As you've been pouring through some footage, is there something that stood out to you that probably doesn't stand out to most people, like that's just kind of got you excited, giving you goosebumps?
Well, I still got a whole ton of footage to go through, especially on this card. But I will say, especially since the promotion has turned to promoting, like, look how many former champions we have, and kind of leaning away from the main event after it got announced, right? I will say though, in their defense, like, you really should be showing up early. And I'm going to specifically cite the first fight of the night. I believe that so far it's listed, which is Davison Figueiredo versus Cody Garbrandt, which I'm a big fan of. Bantamweights, or even the lighter guys where Figueiredo came from. However, I will say I do want the winner of Peter Yan specifically for this fight, because I have been calling for Davison Figueiredo versus Peter Yan as the best MMA fight you can make that gets even a jaded old curmudgeon like me excited. Okay, since 2018 now. It's almost too late to do it. You finally have another pocket where it makes sense. It's not like a vet versus vet makes sense that they keep dropping the ball with, like, Aldo versus Dominic Cruz, for Christ's sakes. Too busy booking middleweights to open cards. Matchmakers are force feeding us heavyweights on fight night main cards. Yeah, give us Peter Yan versus Davison Figueiredo for the culture.
Dan Tom, you're awesome, man. Thanks for stopping by. You are always welcome on SBC. We hope to have you on a future episode soon. And please let us know when Protect Your Neck podcast comes back, because it's always a joy to listen to that before I start putting that money down. You know what I'm saying? All right.
Hey, it's coming back this week. Love you guys. Peace.
Oh, cool. Awesome. All right. And of course, as Dan Tom exits, we make room for the Boston shot caller, Nolan King, who was a recent nominee at the World MMA Awards for Best Journalist. How you doing, Nolan? Is the eclipse headed your way, man, too?
Yeah. I think Dan Tom and I were wearing the same shirt here. I was thinking about changing, but black tee, can't go wrong. But UFC 300 fight week, it doesn't get better or bigger than this, right?
Mm-hmm. One of the guys from your neck of the woods, Calvin Kattar. We've been talking more about Aljamain Sterling, and his moved up to 145. Look, respect. This guy really approached being maybe the GOAT of bantamweight before he got stopped by O'Malley. That's what we were all saying. He had 3 title defenses and everything. So it's exciting to see him go to a new frontier. But same thing, I guess, that maybe we talked about with Cody Brundage. Are we overlooking Calvin Kattar? You're close to that camp. You in proximity. What do you think, man? What's this guy's approach going to be all about this, with the hype being more on the Sterling side?
It's a bit of a different matchup, I think, than Calvin's faced in the UFC. So I'm very interested to see how his ground game is. I feel like it's a part of his game that we really haven't seen a ton of. I think there's been some rounds here and there where it's hit the ground, but predominantly he doesn't fight guys that are going to want to drag him down. And predominantly we don't see him have to use some of his defensive tools and his defensive wrestling. So there's a little bit of a fuzziness or unknown there, but I do think that overall this is a pretty big fight at 145 that I think's being fairly overlooked here. I mean, anytime somebody shifts weight classes, particularly moving up, you don't really know where they're going to fit, right? Like Aljamain Sterling's body type, he's always been a guy that's had to cut a lot of weight. But does that mean that he'll have success up at 145, against a top 10 guy, against top 5 guys in a title fight scenario? This is really, we're going to learn a lot about Aljamain Sterling on Saturday. And I just think this fight's being so overlooked. This division is awesome. I think we can all agree whenever there's ranked featherweights on a card, you're pretty much going to get an exciting fight. You're going to get a meaningful fight. You're going to see high-level skills. But it's also a really weird division, right? Like, I feel like it's very hard, especially at this point in time, for anybody to have any sort of momentum. If you look at these guys like, Ortega and Yair, even Volkanovski coming off a loss. I believe there's only 4 fighters in the top 15 that are coming off of multi-fight win streaks, which are coming off win streaks. I think it's Max, Evoliev, Topuria, Lerone Murphy, and maybe actually Edson Barbosa. There's actually 5, but it's just hard for people to gain momentum. So I think people are kind of overlooking what's on the line here for both guys. I mean, Calvin Kattar's coming off of a very controversial loss to Josh Emmett, a knee injury in his fight against Arnold Allen. And he really hasn't fought the guys that are sitting at the top of the division, the Topurias of the world, the Volkanovskis of the world, Yair, Ortega. There's a lot of fresh matchups for him. So if he goes out there, he beats Aljamain Sterling, I think he puts himself in a potential title eliminator situation. And same thing for Aljo. Like, I'm not a big fan of people cutting the line or jumping to the front when they move up a division, but this division's just in a place right now where it's just kind of up for grabs. So I think it's a big fight for both guys. And I think people are, like all the fights on the prelims, right? People are kind of overlooking the stakes of this one.
Was it more the right move for Sterling because it was just tough to make 35, or was it because the whole teammate thing with Merab?
I think both, man. I think there was just a lot of boxes that were checked here. You know, when he announced that he like officially was going up, I mean, I love the move. Like, I think sometimes people are too reactive. If this was, another timeline where he and O'Malley fought close 5-round fight and it was a split decision and Merab didn't exist, like, sure, like a guy that had a pretty dominant reign at bantamweight, I think is right in that conversation to either have an immediate rematch, maybe sit on the shelf for a little bit, have Sean fight, and then he gets the rematch, or fight once there and then fight for the title. But I think this is just a really smart move for Aljo. We heard him talking about the weight class issue before he even lost the belt. So I think it is something that's been hindering him a bit. So I just love the move all around. I think it checks a lot of boxes.
Can Sterling net himself a title shot if he wins and wins impressively, bearing in mind that Volk doesn't like to A, not fight, and B, not have a gold around his waist? And then you got Max Holloway, who could do something spectacular too, and then just go, all right, deuces, I'm going back to 45 because Volk's no longer there. So there's a lot to consider here. How big of a moment can this be for Sterling?
Well, first of all, it'd have to be a really, really impressive performance, right? Because you look at a guy like Davidson Figueiredo, he went from flyweight to bantamweight, and he got a very solid win, and none of us really felt like even mentioning that, right? So it's got to be something really big, like come out and KO Calvin Kattar, something like that. But even then, I'd still be shocked because if you look at Aljamain Sterling's career, he hasn't really been a guy that the UFC does a lot of favors for. Traditionally, his roads are kind of tough to the title. So I would probably say no. It seems like that would be a lot.
What do you think, Danny? How big of a fight is this for Sterling in your eyes? There's a lot of leapfrogging he can do, but when you're a former champ, sometimes you get those shots.
Hell yeah. If you're a former champ, I mean, that gets you into a lot of places, into a lot of opportunities that maybe other more deserving contenders wouldn't get. I do think that if Aljamain Sterling wins here, I do think he could get a potential shot against Topuria. I think people are overlooking his chances of fighting for the belt. Yeah, okay. I think so. I mean, he's a former champ. He's the most dominant champion we've ever seen at 135 in the UFC. He gets a victory over a top 10 guy. I think that's worthy of a title shot. Now, I know Holloway's there, but Holloway could very much lose to Gaethje. Volkanovski, there's that potential rematch as well, but they're also going to his side of the world as well, so they might use him for another fight. I do think a good promo here, a good solid win, he can get a title shot off that. And look, I think Aljamain Sterling, Nolan and I were there in Boston for UFC 292. I think Aljamain Sterling is a fantastic B side, and I mean that as a compliment because everybody wants to be the A side, but playing kind of like the heel and propping up the main guy, he does that well. And I think against Topuria, he will do he could definitely sell a fight. I think that's a fight that interests Topuria as well. Topuria has told me I got grappling and I want to show that. I've yet to show it, but I want to show that as well. And who better against than Aljamain Sterling? So I think this is a phenomenal matchup for Sterling's debut, and I do think there's a lot on the line for him. So, I absolutely love it. And I think it's the right move, too, like 145. Look, we got Deiveson Figueiredo in the prelims trying to reinvent himself at 36 years of age in a new weight class. I think we can all agree it's not ideal to be at that age trying to, seek a second title. I think right now, 34, the weight cuts are tough. I talked to Diego Lopez a few days ago. He told me he's grappled and trained in Vegas with Aljamain Sterling and feels him very much like a featherweight. Dude, I think he could be, this could be a nice chapter of his career if all goes well for him on Saturday night.
All right. Now, you've kind of said a lot of things that almost lead me to think that you think Sterling's winning.
I think Sterling is winning. Yeah. And I do think there's a chance that he gets the title shot here.
I got Calvin Kattar in this one, man. I think it's a little bit too big. I think the power, I'll go with Kattar.
He can stop the takedowns, guys?
I think so.
Okay. Boston shot caller, New England guys, they hang tight. Shot callers work for cartels. I don't want to make any connections here. What are your thoughts?
You're setting me up for some to get kicked out of here with all that hype. No, I'm actually leaning with Aljamain Sterling. There were two when Matt Erickson sent out our staff picks email this week. There were two fights that I'm like, I might end up switching. I might end up sending that last minute email that I'm switching my pick. This was one of them, but at this point in time, I'm going with Aljamain.
Karate Ted Toon says Dana hates Aljo, no favors for him, but Making the Walk MMA says Topuria versus Sterling would be a low-key big fight. I think Sterling needs 2 wins, though, at featherweight to get it. Karate Tattoos comes back and says, Calvin's jab will be the key. Man, I'm getting pumped up for some of these fights. Great idea by Danny Segura. I want to give him a shout out. He's been kind of taking a little bit of the reins here on Spinning Back Clique, and he planned this whole monster 90 minutes so we could kind of get you guys going here for fight week, right? And let me just tell you guys, we got a big team headed to Vegas to cover UFC 300. So keep it locked on MMA Junkie throughout the week. We got a free app for tablets and mobile phones, right? The YouTube channel, it really, really pops. I haven't been bugging you guys over the 90 minutes. Hit the like and the subscribe on the way out. Maybe you didn't do it at the beginning. Do it on the way out. We would really, really thank you. But I'm telling you, that YouTube channel is going to have a lot of content. Like Mike Bond pointed out earlier, all 26 fighters are going to be at the media days and everything. And they're all big names. What is it, like 10%, guys? 10% of all the champions that have ever worn gold in the UFC are on this card. And that's 30 years of promoting fights, and think about all the champions they've had. So 10% of them are on this fight card. Huge stuff going down. Goes and I will be doing a watch along on Saturday from beginning to end. Let's start with Fada, who was with us a second ago. She's going to host a preview show at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific, and then basically hand the baton to Goes and I. We're going to go from 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, all the way until either Hill or Pereira is unconscious, because I think that's the way that fight's going to end, unfortunately.
Maybe us being
we might be unconscious too. I'm gonna drink for this one, man. I'm gonna have a little bit of fun. I'm gonna have some Peruvian beers and all that good stuff. But guess what, guys? There's still other stuff going on this fight card, right? We got to give some love and finish out a proper UFC 300 Spinning Back Clique preview show. So let's start off with Danny Segura. What's the one fight that's out there that's gonna pop in your eyes that maybe just gets buried under all this talent?
So I'm going with Jessica Andrade versus Marina Rodriguez. Look, why do we watch mixed martial arts? Because there's second, third, fourth, and fifth chances. This is not like boxing where you lose, you're undefeated, and you're out. You lose 2 fights, and we can no longer ever see you in a title fight. No. This is where you can fall, you can stumble, and yet you can get another second win in your career and be champion. So I'm going to say that this fight right here is going to catapult one of these ladies into another title fight. Not next, but I'm saying is going to be the start of a title run. So don't miss out on this fight, because where were you when either Andrade or Rodriguez fought for the title after X amount of losses? You want to hop on the bandwagon early. You don't want to be that guy at the end. So you must tune in for this fight. Both of them are coming off a second round TKO win after some setbacks. Both won performances of the night in their last fight. They're 2 badass Brazilians. This fight is a must watch. So please, please, please do not miss out on Jessica Andrade versus Marina Rodriguez.
Some Brazil on Brazil crime is what Danny Segura is suggesting. Possibly a future champion against a former champion. I'm all about this matchup, man. I think it's a good one. Of course, I've already said it, and I won't waste any more time. Well, I will in the next 10 seconds. This should have been in Brazil, by the way, but I'm happy that it's here. Goes, how about you, man? What's a fight that's getting buried under all this talent that you just think, hey, no, y'all ain't talking about this one enough?
Well, allow me to waste another 10 seconds, because this one could have been in Brazil too when you think about it. Deiveson Figueiredo, Cody Garbrandt. Look, I know this Vegas crowd. I've been a part of this Vegas crowd. They drift in late. They walk in like the Walking Dead about halfway through a card. They sit down, and then they get into the card once the main card starts. Don't make that mistake. Get there for the first fight. I'm telling you, grab a hot dog, a beer, sit down, be there for that first fight, because these 2 guys are kicking off the card. Are you kidding me, man? They both have one punch power. And it's kind of funny because they both have something to prove, right? They have that in common. If you look at Cody Garbrandt, he suffered a couple L's here and there, right? He's trying to prove to us that he still has what it takes. If you look at Deiveson Figueiredo, what does he have to prove, right? He's in a new weight class. He wants to show us that, despite reaching the highest points in a previous division, he can do that here again and show us that he still has something for us as well. So him and Cody are kind of like in the same boat. Something's got to give. And these 2 guys, man, I just don't if you're going to get a beer and a hot dog, get an extra one for the judges, because I don't think we're going to need them. Somebody's going to be laying flat to start off this card. There's a reason why they put it there. That's my go-to. It's going to have fireworks.
They know what it feels like to wear gold, so they're going to do everything it takes to still make those final runs. I like that one. All right. The Boston Shot Caller, what's your fight that's getting buried under all this talent that is UFC 300 that people just should not skip?
Well, we have a very important light heavyweight headliner, obviously, right? We also have a very important, overlooked light heavyweight contender fight on the prelims, Yuri Proyaskia versus Alexander Rakic. For me, Yuri was at the Apex last week, right? I saw somebody tweet that he arrived. He's sitting in the front row. He's looking like a samurai. That tweet on Twitter did great numbers. He is an interesting person when he is just sitting in a room doing nothing. So then you throw him in a cage, and he is bonkers. I mean, I don't have to sell him. Anybody can look at his highlight reel. If you gave me right now 2 minutes to write down every single type of strike that Yuri's going to throw in this fight, I probably wouldn't get them all. I probably wouldn't even be able to name them all that are going to happen in the first round. So for me, I mean, Yuri is must-see TV. It's a very important fight for light heavyweight. Who knows, too, like them being aligned on this card, was that somewhat intentional? I know obviously you have Magomed Ankalaev waiting, chilling up there at the top of the division too, but this is a very important fight at 205 pounds. It's being aligned with a title fight. We've seen in the past how they like to do that. And it's just a banger on paper. I mean, anytime Yuri fights, you need to tune in.
I also heard, I think this might be a rumor, but I think I heard from Cold Coffee that when Yuri stepped into the UFC Apex with his antenna, I think the Wi-Fi went up like 50%.
Probably true, my friend. Listen, Sodiq Yusuff, this guy's been in the UFC for a minute. He obviously wins more than he loses for sure, and he's only lost to the top guys, but somehow even on those win streaks, he just doesn't pick up much momentum, right? However, one of the scariest fighters in the world is a fighter that's always coming off a loss. You don't want to lose to begin with. You just lose everything you've gained through these win streaks. But when you do and you lose two, people start doubting you. So I think Sodiq Yusuff is going to get back to his winning days, man, because at the early part of his career, if you look at it, that guy used to actually finish people. And then he kind of slowed down. I think he started overthinking things or whatever. Plus, the competition got tougher. So I think that's what makes him dangerous. He's just a tough out. Like I say, only the top guys, the top cats have given him losses. Allen and Evloev, if I'm not mistaken. No. I'm sorry. Allen and Edson Barbosa. So, yeah, he's coming off a loss. He's going to be dangerous. Diego Lopez. This guy, dude, his career hasn't even been that long, but every time they flash him on the screen, it's like they're flashing Tom Brady or somebody. The crowd goes nuts. How the hell do you own two countries as well? He's Brazilian, but he might even be more popular in Mexico. I got to tip my hat to that guy. Good looking dude. Awkward haircut for me, but hey, I'm old. I got gray. So what do I know, right? It seems like he registers. And so I got to give him his due. And he's a finisher. Out of 23 fights, he's finished 21. If you bought a new house and you wanted your cupboards done, you'd bring him because he's good at finishing. But I'm telling you, these guys are going to collide. Featherweights can crack. All right. I think it's going to be a good one. Don't overlook this one. I think you guys are going to be talking about this one on Monday. All right. Guys, great job. Listen, we still got a couple minutes. If you've seen a comment or if there's just been something you've been hanging on to or you want to say on the way out that we cannot miss because it's an epic week, go ahead. You got about 30 seconds each. Danny, what you got for us, man? What
I'm just shook right now that you're not a fan of Diego Lopez's hair. That's like the best part. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love knockouts. I love submissions. But that hairstyle, I've seen it in person.
If I had more hair, Danny, look, I don't have much hair. If I had more, I would make it thick.
Whoa.
I don't know if I'd be Gilbert Burns and shit, right? But I wouldn't be going, hey, everything go that way and 10% this way.
You wouldn't get the mohawk in the bank.
No, I think that's my Wi-Fi just dropped by 20%. What just happened?
That was a delayed reaction. That was great.
I'm not sure about that mop he's got, but whatever. Like I say, he's won me over. I'm a fan. Nolan, how about you, man? What's your final say to the fans about UFC 300? This is historical. The card stacked.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's I think the deepest card in UFC history. I think we can all agree on that. Press conference on Thursday, I'm kind of intrigued to see. I'm a big fan of when it's the right crowd, having all the fighters up on stage can really work, and the fact that there's going to be 26 fighters up there. Hopefully it doesn't become too overwhelming, but I think it gives us the ability to potentially have some of those kind of organic, fun exchanges back like when Connor was chirping Jeremy Stevens and whatnot. So just a historic week all around. And then also on Friday around the time the official weigh-ins, there's going to be some sort of unveiling of some sort of equipment. We don't know exactly what that is. Is it a promotional thing? Is it a glove change? Is it stuff for UFC 300 exclusively? So lots of stuff coming on MMA Junkie this week. A big week for all.
Yeah, and I thought you were also going to say PFL. They're also in town. They're doing their second season, and they had a few people laying people out in round one. You get 6 points, so a lot of people in good positions there. How about you, Goes? You're in that town, man. And you've covered UFC 100, 200. What do you say to the fans about this historical card?
Well, first of all, I'm praying that is a glove change. If you guys could see my background, the hand is the same. That UFC glove was the easiest glove to put on that hand. The hardest one was the Strike Force that had that curvature to it. So I hope that is it. I do want to remind everybody that if you like this, we're doing the same thing on Monday, right, guys? We're going
90 minutes
long on Monday as well.
90 minutes.
So those of you who didn't get here early, and I better not be saying that about a Vegas crowd, get here early for Monday. And I am going to say that to the Vegas crowd, get there early, dude. This whole thing is just a banger. Look, there's times where the UFC gets criticism from us. They did everything they could to make us happy. It didn't work out probably the way they wanted, but what we ended up with is pretty special, and I think it's going to be a great card. Join us on the watch along.
Join us on the watch along, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. Danny, anything for tu audiencia en español? Hablemos MMA. What do you got for them?
Dropped interview with Diego Lopez this morning, and then I'll have a preview in Spanish for UFC 300. So make sure you subscribe and like as well over there, and we'll see you guys soon in español.
I do want to add one last thing, George. Going out, happy birthday to our mother who turns 81 tomorrow.
Hey, shouts out.
Yeah, and one of the solid cats on our team had a birthday yesterday, Abby. I hope he's having a good time in Las Vegas. Big shout out to Abby. Big shout out to Kenny. They do stuff behind the scenes that help us put out a great show for you guys. And it's every Monday, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. This is Spinning Back Clique. It's live. It's the junkie crew that rotates, right? But like Goes pointed out, next week will be another 90-minute show. But after that, always count on the noon Eastern start time. Folks, we're out of here. Enjoy fight week. Enjoy UFC 300. We'll see some of you guys at the watch along, the ones that are in Vegas. Enjoy the fights. Go out and be a champion. Don't forget to wear them glasses if you stare at that eclipse. We'll talk soon.